Entitlement, what is it and how could it be undermining your happiness and even your health? Welcome to Healing from A to Z with Masterful You and KB. Hi, I'm Chris Burke. And today we're talking about entitlement and probably some surprising things that you haven't heard before. I'm going to be talking, as I always do, from my own experience. This is what I have learned is true about entitlement and how it kept me from experiencing happiness and how it affected my health. So I want to share that with you. Entitlement, first of all, is the idea that somebody owes you something or somebody owed you something. Or that because, for whatever reason, maybe it's because you think, I'm a nice person, people should do this for me. Or because I was born on planet Earth, my parents should have been good parents, even if nobody ever taught them how to be. Or they grew up in an environment that wasn't happy or healthy. They should have known how to do that. So entitlement is this idea that things should be different than they are. And it's funny because a lot of us, I know for me, I knew that my shoulds, if I was saying I should this or I should that, at some point I learned that that was going to contribute to me being unhappy, to feeling always tormented. I should be different than I am, which isn't actually possible, right? Or somebody else should be different than they are. That's not looking at reality, that's arguing with reality, and that's always going to put us in a place of conflict. So I knew that, but I hadn't actually taken that to the part of entitlement, of actually looking back on life and saying, my parents should have been different than they are, or my grandparents should have been different, or the town I lived in should have been different, or the school I went to should have been different, or all of the things, right? We should have had more money, or we should have had whatever the things are. The problem with entitlement is that it makes us feel like victims, and it makes us feel like we have an excuse for not really showing up for ourselves, for not really taking responsibility for our own experience. If I decide that I am going to be happy and healthy, if I decide that's a priority for me, then I can make that a priority and I can actually live that experience. However, if I have a story in my unconscious that says that I'm not happy and healthy because I was a victim of, whatever it is, parenting, school, finances, whatever the thing is that we're saying we should have been different, then I'm going to actually be working at cross purposes because I'm going to have a story in my unconscious that I need to maintain, a belief that needs to be maintained by my instincts. It has to maintain this sense of identity, this sense of self-image. So we really want to get in there and find out what it is that we're telling ourselves that is causing us to carry resentment instead of be on the path to healing. So that's what we'll be talking about today. So gratitude is a really good remedy or treatment for resentment. Can we look at those environments where we think things should have been different, and can we be grateful for what was there? Can we look at what people were able to do, what people tried to do, the way that people did the best they could? Can we look at that? It's funny, I used to think that was kind of bullshit. I used to say that I didn't think people were trying the best they could. I didn't think they were doing the best they could. I thought they knew they could do better and that they should be doing better because they knew that they should be. And what I've learned at Masterful You on my own journey to own your experience, own your interactions, own your influence, what I learned in that 3-step process is that people have a lot of ideas in their head about what they should be doing, but if they don't have the tools, if they don't know how to go about inventorying their experience and finding out what's in their unconscious that they're living out, then they're victims of their own programming, of their own unconscious programming, which usually comes from our environment, right? From the people and the beliefs and the emotions and the physical um, environment as well, the physical substances that were in our environment when we were growing up. So not only did that affect us, but it also affected our parents and it affected their parents, right? So our environments do affect us and they help to shape us. And if we don't know what our environment and the people in that environment are putting into our unconscious, what we're believing about ourselves, what we're believing about life, then we just become victims of that as well, just as our parents did and their parents did before them, right? So let's let everybody off the hook, have a little bit of compassion, and realize we didn't know how to do our healing in a way that would lead to happiness and health. Look around the world, it's pretty obvious that we did not know. And now we're in a position where we can. And we can decide to get on that bandwagon instead of on the one of sitting there looking at our past and saying it should have been other than it was, or fighting with reality, right? So let's let go of our entitlements and let's say, I can take responsibility for my experience. I can own my own experience, and then happiness and health can be mine, right? And then we get to make choices about, do we want to hang out with people who are also choosing to live in happiness and health, or do we want to continue to hang out with people who are looking at the past and playing victim? And I'm not saying that in a, that's not a judgment. I spent a lot of my life looking back and feeling like if things had been different, then I would have had a different experience. I would be a different person. And actually that is true. But the point of owning my experience is that as long as I was sitting there looking at the past and saying it should have been different, then I wasn't taking responsibility for the present moment and learning how to be that happier, healthier person that I wanted to be. That was at the root of that, I wish things had been different. There was actually a desire to be different, and I can take responsibility for that just like you can. That's what being masterful is all about. Now we can do an exercise that will actually help us to start moving this entitlement experience forward. So if you think about some area where you have resentment, where you feel something should be different or somebody should be different, think about that experience. That place where, this requires us to be like really honest with ourselves. Like, yeah, I feel like that person should be different, or that person should have been different. It requires us to be honest, especially after we've just had this little conversation, right? So take that person that you think things should be different, write down 3 things that you think should be different about them. You were entitled to something that was different. Write down those 3 things. And then write down 3 things about this person that you are grateful for. 3 things that maybe it's hard to acknowledge. Sometimes it's hard to acknowledge that someone was offering some part of themselves and that it wasn't enough, so we didn't care. Can we find those pieces and write those down? Circle that. This is your starting place. This is the starting place for the experience you're in right now. Now we're going to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's find out where we are. Where we are is so much more important than who we are. And I know that contradicts everything you've ever learned. But to get to happiness and health, we really have to understand it's not who we are. It's where we are in our experience in the moment. And we can learn to choose where that is. We can learn to relocate, which means we're completely empowered. So on a scale of 1 to 10, this is your internal compass. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being it's really hard to get out of bed in the morning because my experience is just so heavy and I feel so out of control. And 10 is I'm blissfully happy and trusting that whatever is happening is what's working for my highest good. Where are you on that scale right now? This is an intuitive exercise. What number pops into your head, that's your number. Just write it down. That's your starting experience. Now we're going to interview that starting experience. And we're going to say, when I am at this number in regards to this experience that I've just circled, this situation or this person that I've just circled, my experience of them, right? What am I thinking? What are your thoughts about this person or this situation? Write that down. I think. Then write down what you're feeling. Then what you're saying and doing to yourself and to others. What's the internal dialogue? What are you doing to yourself as a result of this experience? What are you saying or doing to other people as a result? Are you talking about this situation? What are you saying? Are you doing something to the person who you feel should be different? What is that? No judgment. We're just getting real with ourselves so we can take ownership of this experience. It takes courage, and you're doing great. Okay, next is sense. What do I sense in my body? Really think about, in our society, we hop out of our body a lot, meaning we're living in our head instead of in our full body experience. So we're thinking conceptually, we're projecting things out, expecting things, comparing what we expected to what we think is happening, right? So we really want to get into our body and say, what's going on in here? It contains a lot of wisdom and a lot of information that can be really helpful. So just scan your body, think about how it feels as you move along with your mind, and just switch your focus along your body and notice where it's tense, where you feel resistance. A lot of times you'll feel something in your stomach or your heart, or your jaw can be tight. You might notice your toes are clenched, right? When we're carrying stress or when we're feeling like we're doing something that's a little scary, which self-discovery can be, especially in the beginning, then you might feel a physiological reaction to that. Your body's kind of going, oh, I don't know, I feel a little nervous about this. It's all perfectly natural. Just notice it. And then finally, what do you know is true when you're at this number of experience? What do you know is true? Okay, now that's your starting place. Good job. We have to start where we are. So often we're talking about what shoulda, woulda, coulda happened, what we wish had happened, how we, hope things will be different, but we're not talking about the reality of where we are. And until we really understand where we are, how can we move forward? How can we even know where forward is? Right? So that's what this exercise is about. We're now grounded in the truth of this is my experience right now. Your experience is what matters, because when you change your experience, the outside changes as well. You perceive it differently, and people behave differently because you show up differently. It's a truth. And you don't need to take my word for it, because what I'm inviting you to do in this exercise is to actually explore and experiment with me and find out for yourself. You can trust your own experience. Okay, now we're going to decide where we're going. On that scale of 1 to 10, where are you headed? Where are you choosing to have your experience? By now, if you've been listening to my videos, you know I always recommend that you choose like a 7 or an 8, in part because the 10 is going to keep moving further and further away as you start realizing, wow, I was living in, a lot of fight or flight, because most of us are. And I didn't realize I was anxious all the time. I was stressed out all the time. I was maybe depressed in a heavy energy all the time, right? And we have coping mechanisms for dealing with that. And then we blame ourselves for having these coping mechanisms. What we're doing now is we're moving along on the scale and finding out, wow, when I start feeling better, when I start moving from a different source of energy, more intuitive, more inspired, less instinct and intellect, then I actually start feeling lighter and more capable, and I start seeing ideas or seeing the path forward, right? Life just becomes easier and more fun. And then I realize, wow, my sights were set really low, because usually we're just looking for security. And when we start getting more toward that 7-8 experience, we start saying, oh, how much better can it get? And it's so much better. The 10 just goes like on and on and on. It can keep getting better and better and better, your experience, right? How you experience your being you in this life. That's what really matters here. So now let's decide, now that you have that number, you're going to interview yourself, your wisdom, your internal guidance system, and you're going to say, what's it going to be like? What am I going to be thinking? So this is where it's going to be different, right? You're going to make it tangible. What will I be thinking when I'm at this number I've chosen to experience? And of course, remember, when you get to that number, you can always up your number, right? This is just for now, where your goal is. Okay. And then we're going to say, what will I be feeling when I'm at that number? What will I be saying and doing to myself and others? What will the internal dialogue be? How will you be treating yourself? How will you be feeling about being you? Right? What will you be sensing in your body? What will be different? When you're doing self-discovery, when you're checking in with yourself and finding out how it's going, what's it going to feel like in your body? What will be different? What will be better? And then finally, what will you know is true about you and your experience? When you get to this higher number, when you're living this higher number and you're going, whoa, this works. When I focus on my experience and I decide that it's going to be different, I can really have a different experience. What will you know is true from that moment on? All right, great work. Now we're going to do what I like to call the magic toaster. Our conscious mind, our intellect, is really, really good at setting direction, at deciding what it is that we want, kind of putting the request into the universe, if you will, right? Or into our own unconscious mind, because as we learn as we go along, the universe is a lot closer than we thought, right? So as we go along in that process, our intellect is going to set the direction. Our conscious mind will set the direction, and it will ask questions. The questions that it asks will be answered by the unconscious. Any of the energy that's in the unconscious mind will come forward to answer your questions. So it's kind of like, you forget where you put your keys, or you can't think of a name, and you're like trying to think like, oh, where is that? But that information isn't present in your conscious mind at that moment. It's actually been stored away. So what we need to do is to ask the unconscious, the storage bins, to send that information forward. That's why we'll say, oh, it's not coming to me right now. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it. I know it, but I can't think of it right now. It'll come to me, right? And then later on, when you're in the shower, driving the car, whatever it is, all of a sudden you've relaxed your thinking, and boop, up comes the answer from the unconscious. It was just waiting for a break in your thinking to send the information to you. We can't think and receive. Thinking is active, receiving is passive. We can't think and receive at the same time. That's why so many people love meditation. That's why a walk in the woods is so good. Because anytime we allow our thinking brain to kind of take a break, and we just start noticing what's around us, being present in our environment, the unconscious mind can send through answers to a lot of questions or a lot of things we've maybe been wondering about. So that's the magic toaster. You put in the request, or you set the direction, and then you allow your unconscious to do its job, which is to give you the information that you need to make progress. And the question that we're going to ask at this time is, what do I need to know or do in order to move along on my journey from where I am to where I'm going? I'm basically giving you the framework of the Own Your Experience class. There's a lot more to it, and of course there's guidance and support to help you along in your journey. But this is the basic process that we use. We're starting to build that internal dialogue and that trust in our own inner knowing. The connections need to be restored, And we need to get our faith back in those connections. We need to be able to trust what we know again. Because living in a world that tells us that things are a certain way, even when our sense of it is, that doesn't seem quite right to me, right? But everybody else seems to believe what they're being told. And so we just decide, well, it must be I can't trust what I think is true. Must be I'm wrong. The whole world can't be wrong. It must be me that's wrong. We're going to start working on that, because in order to be happy and healthy, you actually have to know what you know. You have to be able to know that what you know is right and true for you, regardless of what's going on in the world. Not in an ego way, not in an I'm always right. This is in a when you know something is true, that you can know it no matter what. That's when you feel masterful. That's when you, in fact, are masterful and you feel invincible, because you're solid in your own experience of being in your skin. Yeah, on Fridays, show up for Judy and I doing our live Q&A. And hopefully that will, it's 11 o'clock Eastern time. And the last couple of weeks, we've had snafus where it just hasn't happened. So we'll hope that this week it does. On the E week, we'll make a magical return. That's the hope. If you're enjoying this video, please like, share, and subscribe. It's only together that we are going to heal ourselves and our planet and change our course. So let's spread the word. For more information and support, please go to masterfulu, the letter U.com. And we have all kinds of resources there that will support you on your journey. Congratulations for showing up today. Thank you for spending your precious time with me. And most of all, thank you for being you.